Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Laura Milojevic. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Simplify. Today, we're excited to have our managing partner, John Essig, discussing and demoing how to plan with financial statement planning in SAP Analytics Cloud. Also, when the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. If you can please fill that out, we would really appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out to John or myself after the webinar with any questions. So now I'll hand it over to John and he can get started.
All right, great. Thank you, Lauren. And we'll just put my webcam on for a moment here just to say hi to everyone. Thanks for joining today. So again, John Essig from Simplify. I'm a partner and architect, been implementing planning and analytics solutions for the past decade, as well as consolidations applications, and excited to share Simplify's prepackaged content for financial planning to help those attending realize what you could accomplish with SAC. All right. So I do have just a couple slides to kind of set the context, and then I promise we'll spend 75% plus on the actual demo, as I know that is what I would like to see if I were you. So this is just a quick summary of Simplify's prepackaged content that we have built out for planning, analytics, training, modernization, different industry applications. We're really more focused on the planning side of the house, although we'll cover a little bit from a reporting perspective. Most of the time when you're building out financial statement planning, you also want to be able to see, comparative reporting, analytics, be able to get that out of the same system too. So there's certainly value in that and this content that comes with, right? All these different solutions are prepackaged in a way that, we can help customers implement in weeks by just standing up our content with your master data structures and transaction structures, whether that's from an Excel data source, S4, SAP, ERP, Oracle, wherever, right? Obviously, there's really good integration with SAP Analytics Cloud, but from any structured data source as a starting point. So we can stand up those prepackaged solutions. We can also help with managed implementations from a low configuration gap fit approach, medium or high, right? So the solutions that we're really focused on today, this slide should give you a little bit of an understanding for how the different planning solutions come together architecturally, right? So if we started at the top of the house from a P&L perspective, we want to be able to generate a sales plan. And if you do that in detail within an application like this, driver base, you might be doing this by customer, product, right? If you are a business where you actually, utilize and track pipeline, we have a separate prepackaged solution to plug into CRM solutions or Salesforce, which then integrates with your sales planning as well. If sales is different for you than revenue, we have a process to help with revenue recognition, translate that into your revenue planning, content that helps you build up standard costing and actual costing with your variances. And then even help you look at production planning and transfer pricing scenarios to build up, consolidated gross and actual margin for you within this application here. So all of these items through growth profitability then would feed into a P&L and balance sheet and financial statement reporting model. You don't have to implement this content to implement this, right? A lot of companies start by utilizing financial statement planning to help them collect and aggregate their plan. And they may or may not get into this further level of detailed driver-based granularity. There is a lot of value there as well. On the expense side of the house, if you look at draw your eyes to the bottom half of this diagram, you have what are your big expenses from an HR people perspective. So you can plan, detailed salaries by employee or by headcount within this solution. You have prepackaged content for that. You have capital planning, so you can do project planning. You can do, asset planning within this solution. And then your people expenses and your depreciation, flow into your expense and P&L applications. Again, you don't have to implement these subcomponents. That's up to you based off of what passes a cost-benefit analysis for your company. But certainly, for the vast majority of companies, this is kind of like the bare minimum what we'll show today, which can drive, a lot of value to at least, again, help you collect and aggregate your plan and then run comparative reporting off of it, especially when you look at, detailed expense plans by cost center, for example, which is also part of this financial statement planning accelerator that we're going to be walking you through today. So everything that's included with this solution set is in these blue bubbles. I'll touch on these other topics just a little bit to see so you can understand how they fit together a little bit more, but we'll be focusing 90% of our time on the financial statement planning side of the house, right? So what all does this include? This includes, plan and actual for P&L, expenses, working capital, balance sheet, cash flow, and then reporting and variance commentary, right? So this can help companies, eliminate all of the time in Excel spent, collecting and aggregating data, paying, highly paid financial analysts, right, to send Excel files back and forth and then sum them up. So this can eliminate that effort. It also can help, arguments around, what is the actual budget version, final, blessed version, what are the right sets of numbers to utilize. And then obviously when implementing a system like this, unlike Excel, you then don't have to deal with inflexible kind of broken links and issues like that, right? So this solution can help solve, a lot of those different business pain points that we see at companies who are still utilizing Excel, because for companies that are growing, right, or even for more mature companies at smaller size, there are a lot of firms still out there utilizing Excel, right? So this just shows, some of those goals. Obviously, there's a lot of time savings. At Simplify, we commonly help companies build up business cases, right? So if you need to articulate this value of a solution like this back to your executives and help get buy-in, this is just an example of some of the goals and value that it can drive to justify the cost, which will hopefully eventually, make your life easier. So I'll just quickly cover the components and we'll jump into the demo itself of the financial statement planning. So again, I mentioned, as an output of your financial statement plan, you want solid reporting. SAP Analytics Cloud, has very strong analytics capabilities, including like bridge-based reporting. This is SAP's strategic solution for analytics as well as for financial planning on the cloud. And Lauren, I just saw a note here from one of the attendees. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. It hasn't broken
great.
up at all for me.
Okay, great. We will provide a recording and post this to YouTube afterwards if for whatever reason you're having trouble with the audio. So yeah, as SAP Analytics Cloud, this is the platform we're focused on today as SAP's strategic tool for planning, analytics, and predictive. The nice thing is you can get these, more print-ready type comparative financial statement reports for your P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, out of the tool. But again, you can also get, bridge-based reporting, executive dashboarding. SAC has a strong calculation engine, so we have another accelerator that helps you build out. You can plug in to help you build out all of these kind of bridge-based reports to pre-calculate these results and run this variance type analysis. So the financial statement reporting, I will note, SAC does have, consolidation capabilities available within the tool. So when you're talking about financial statement reporting for large companies, it's also commonly important that they're able to see those results consolidated. And of course, you could load the consolidated eliminations and results from another system if you're utilizing, a group reporting type tool or another third-party consolidations tool. But hey, if you set up partners within your P&L model, within your balance sheet and cash flow models, trading partners, you can also perform the eliminations within this solution. So it's something definitely consider as you're, if you're evaluating a deployment. SAP also supports currency translation, so you can load your data, plan your data in local currency, and it'll translate it according to the applicable rates. And obviously, we have plan and actual balance sheet and cash flows. On the actual side, we're loading our balance sheet, calculating our cash flow. On the plan side, we're deriving a lot of this from our P&L plan and then using drivers to build up our working capital and cash flow plan. So not going to go through too much more of this. I'm always happy to provide this PowerPoint deck as a takeaway, which has some screenshots of some of the content that we're going to cover today. If you want to take it, for reference. So we will cover working capital, we'll cover P&L planning, we'll cover cost center planning, right? That's part of this content. And again, what is a prerequisite? SAP Analytics Cloud. I'm not going to go through these detailed slides. Again, I can provide them for you. So you need SAP Analytics Cloud planning licenses. That is key. And then again, this can plug into any structured data source. With our prepackaged content, that's included as part of a deployment, whether it's managed or not. And enablement, we don't charge any licensing or anything like that on our content, right? It's really to help companies get going. All right, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this solution. Okay. So this is our launch page. I'm actually going to just start for those of you who may not be familiar with SAC, just give a very, very quick overview so that those of you who are, you can hit the snooze button for 60 seconds right here. But like I said earlier, SAP Analytics Cloud is SAP's strategic cloud-based solution for planning, analytics, and predictive, all in one solution. So within this solution, we can create visualizations. Stories is the terminology that SAC uses for that, for all of your reports and visualizations that you put together. This includes board books that you can publish out of this solution and actually distribute into PowerPoint or distribute into Excel as well. Within this tool, you can create analytics applications. So what does that mean? Everything you're going to see today is utilizing standard what I would call self-service content, right? There's no programming behind the reports that we're going to show. We do utilize data actions, which utilizes advanced functions to help us calculate based off of some of the business drivers that we have for our plan. But all of the stories and inputs, again, are just utilizing standard kind of self-service drag and drop build out, right? They're not highly complicated to build. They're things that we can, have trained our customers on how to do so. Analytic applications are a little bit different. So if you gave us a dashboard and you said, hey, I want this to look exactly like this, or I want, custom buttons and sliders so that I can move this up and down and see the impact to this scenario analysis. So, and these analytic applications, we can build anything you have, drawn up in your mind on a piece of paper, right? We can kind of very much build to spec. Everything you will show today, though, utilizes the standard story content. This is the solution that Digital Boardroom sits on top of. Digital Boardroom is essentially an appliance, right, that you can utilize to help you do planning and scenario analysis in a big screen, touch-enabled way, right, that you could do in your boardroom or on a shop floor. SAC is a very strong modeling tool, so it's an OLAP modeling tool similar to like a BPC or an S-base, so it has strong reporting capabilities. Because of that, it does also have some relational modeling capabilities, which is what these data sets are, similar to what you would do within a SQL or a Power BI, right? I mentioned, we have the capability in this tool to utilize advanced formulas, which are wizard-based driven approaches that help us build our planning calculations. We also have allocation capabilities in this tool if you wanted to do overhead allocations that shouldn't go back to your local books, or if you wanted to do profitability type allocations, and then predictive, as I mentioned earlier. This is a secure solution. So, everything you would expect to see here from a user, roles and task profiles, and teams and configuration and setup you have available. And then it's kind of neat, within the solution too. I know this was a pain point in some legacy solutions, like you can import security settings from other systems pretty easily. There's calendar functionality available within the solution. I won't cover this today. We've covered this in many other demos, but you can create input tasks and track the status and create notifications for your users so that when you publish out your plan, instead of you sending an email to everyone, it'll blast it to them. And then what's actually kind of neat, one of my favorite things is you can set reminders on here so that, you don't necessarily have to be pestering everyone, right? If they're late or, a day before a reminder, right? It comes from the generic kind of email inbox from SAC. So that's what I want to cover from an overview. So I'm looking at our homepage. This homepage can be customized to the individual. It can also be pushed out to the individuals from a corporate perspective as a default. Recently, did an HR planning analytics demo, so I have some of my headcount information and waterfalls on my own homepage, and then I also have some of my recent stories and information here too. We're going to go ahead and launch right into financial statement planning. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the catalog here, and here is where you can see a lot of our different prepackaged planning and analytics content that I was mentioning a little bit earlier. So I'm going to look for our financial statement planning catalog and launch what we call our launch pad, which guides us through the financial statement planning process, right? So we can start the process by setting targets, by seeding our budget. Next, we move into our expense and cost center plan, and then that feeds into our financial statement planning. And then we do our reporting and review, and we can close and lock out our periods. So this launch pad is commonly something that even as part of a prepackaged solution, we can tweak a little bit and do some low configuration on to meet your requirements. These are very easy to edit and add steps. Again, there's no coding in here, right? You just add links and stuff on here. So it's pretty neat functionality. You can pin these different visualizations and dashboards that you create, elsewhere. You can just pin it onto this canvas, which is pretty nice too. And then, like I mentioned, we typically, would launch in and publish this via a calendar, but I'm gonna, not go through every single step here. So we're just gonna start with the target setting step. So here, is where, from SAP Analytics Cloud perspective, before we begin our budgeting process, for example, we can utilize this tool to actually set targets. So we haven't built up our budget yet. We see our actual. We're going to do our budgeting and planning for 2020, where we have some of this data pre-populated, but not all of it already. And then we have our 2019 forecast here for reference. So we can have these different versions, and this is a very standard approach that you see in SAP Analytics Cloud, that you can help track to see, your budget, your forecast, and then from an executive perspective, instead of putting targets on a napkin, right, you can actually load and allocate these in the system to provide guidance to your users as they actually update the budget. So right now you can see our target is 0. We could type in numbers here. This is at a total company macro level, or we could actually seed our target, and we can do that based off of the forecast or budget scenario that we want to copy in. So we essentially run this, it copies the data in, we can do some scenario analysis, we can follow these same steps to pre-populate our budget, or what we could actually do is we could run predictive scenarios to populate our budget. We could load drivers to help us seed our budget. So there's a number of different ways. We've shown this in a number of other demos, so I'm not going to go into more detail here. I really want to focus more on the financial statement plan. So at this point, we're assuming we've gone ahead and set up our budget. We've set our targets. Again, this also supports exchange rates. So we have our exchange rates loaded at this point. We publish out this budget so that users can go in and start building up their plan. And first, we're going to start with the expense planning step here. So when you click into expense plan, this is a planning process that you could do with a limited group of financial analysts that are aligned to cost center managers, or you could completely decentralize this process and publish cost center planning, expense planning templates out to each of your individual cost center managers to push down that ownership of their plan, as well as variance reporting and commentary when they see the actuals coming through, right? The further you decentralize that process, the more value you get from a collection and aggregation perspective, so that finance isn't in the middle of that. Now, you can still have a business plan, and you can have your finance override and adjustments, right? So that does not mean that the cost center managers need to own the final results of the plan. Still owned and reviewed and approved by finance, right? So when you come into your cost center planning template, If you were a cost center manager, you would just get a link in an email and you click that link and it would launch you into this template, right? You would be coming right here. You would only see the cost centers that as a cost center manager, as the analyst aligned to that manager, that you are assigned to from a security perspective. So you could plan one cost center at a time. You could plan multiple cost centers. You could plan and isolate individual accounts here. So let's say I'm responsible for this manufacturing cost center here, and I see my general ledger accounts. We can plan at a GL account level, or we can also plan at a GL group expense account grouping level. We see in here our actual and our budget. Our budget is yellow, which means it's input enabled. Our actual is gray, so we cannot input into these cells, so that is controlled and secured through this template. We're obviously, planning out our budget for 2020. If we had some insight into that budget, and given the scenario of what's going on and everything in the economy today, maybe something we'd want to do is to actually look at cutting back our our rental expenses, office expenses, right? So one of the things that's neat is right now we're looking at a budget view. If we wanted to look at this more from a forecast perspective, we could, lock all the way up until, September by just highlighting these cells and then right clicking and saying lock. And then let's say we were able to negotiate down our rental expenses by, $20,000 or $15,000, right? We can just key in a new value and hit enter and distribute, and it'll actually allocate that out into the following months. I guess I typed 1.85 million, so it's a big expense increase for us instead. But pretty neat the way this works. So there's this aggregation capability, so it allows you to plan at all these different levels of detail instead of having to always go into the individual months. This is still stored at a monthly level, but allows you to plan at a quarter, monthly, annual level without any configuration. All this disaggregation functionality comes right from the tool. The other thing I want to mention within this expense planning template, there may be expenses if you were, for example, to implement detailed HR planning to stand up that model that you're acquiring from another more detailed model, like by employee, more headcount driven type model as opposed to account driven here. So what you'll notice is that this account is also grayed out, and we have the ability here to load and seed our salary data from a payroll perspective. And commonly that would be done from an administrator, but it could be, that ownership could also be pushed down to the individual planners depending on who you have doing what, right? So this is just an example. I mentioned HR planning earlier, right? So we can actually load data from a SuccessFactors, from a Workday, right? From a PeopleSoft. We're implementing on a lot of different platforms our HR planning accelerator and analytics here. So again, any structured data source, we can load employee level of information, headcount information, base pay, and then you can utilize this model to actually, calculate, impacts of tax changes and, new hires and headcount changes and structural changes, right? So this is a whole nother planning model. We're not going to get into this in detail. But again, at the end of this process, from a cost center perspective, this is also cost center driven, just different view. Then in your expense process, you're acquiring and sucking up the finalized HR expense into this plan as well. So once we're done with our cost center plan, this was a budget view. I also mentioned, we have a forecast view where you can look at rolling forecasts that pushes forward each month. I mentioned allocations, so we have a demo example, content example in here where it shows you profitability allocations, right? This is an example. Companies approach allocations very much based off their business requirements, but this has common examples for allocating based off of volumes and things like that, right? So that's the expense planning template. So once we're finished with that process, we can go back to our financial statement planning launch pad. And next, we're going to launch right into our financial statement planning step, which is essentially a story or almost like a workbook, right, that has our P&L, working capital, balance sheet plan all together. So in that expense planning step, that would more commonly be done by a cost center manager or by a financial analyst. This step would typically be done either at a company code level, profit center level. It could be done by a plant manager, could be done by a controller for the individual companies, right? So those would be the more typical owners of this step. And they're not only planning the P&L, but they're also able to view and acquire all the detailed plan information. So when you look at this P&L plan template, if you build out all the models and deploy those that I showed you earlier for detailed sales planning, right? Then within this planning template, those accounts, so if I click down into net revenue, right? These accounts are all grayed out because we're acquiring that from our sales and margin plan as that is finalized. Again, if you don't plug in detailed sales and margin planning, just like for HR, then these cells would be yellow, and these are input enabled cells for you to build up your 2020 budget on. So we have our sales and margin planning data for gross profit, all coming from those models. We have our expense planning data, seeding our personnel and T&E expenses, all of our cost center expenses. If we scroll a little bit further down, then we have data coming from our capital planning model, right? We have new depreciation, which we have broken out here for a reason so that you can see the split. That's not a typical account split, but for planning purposes, it's valuable to be able to track this level of detail for new versus existing assets that are coming out of your capital plan. So I'll just note here that our depreciation for our new assets is 2588, right? And I'm just going to open up our capital and asset planning accelerator content here. So again, this is where within this solution you can plan new projects, you can attribute assets to your projects. You can actually, like, really pretty neat, you can calculate NPV, you can calculate IRR, you can build a business case commentary, and then take the output of this and actually, publish it out into a book and manage approvals. Very, very neat accelerator content here around capital and CapEx planning. This has been implemented in a lot of different solutions over many, many different years, but I would encourage you to look at this with a fresh set of eyes, if you haven't started looking at this with SAP Analytics Cloud. And neat things that you can accomplish within this tool. So anyway, all I really wanted to call out is, your output of this is, your project planning and evaluation, right? But feeding into your financial plan is your planned depreciation for both your new assets, again, and then as well as you're uploading your information depreciation for your existing assets. So for West US, which is who we're going through the planning process with, we see, we've updated actually our CapEx plan, and we have 1.58 million of planned depreciation for new assets within our 2020 calendar year. So if I come back to our P&L plan template, again, you can utilize these data actions, and we just, can also have these scheduled to acquire that data set. So our new asset depreciation is 2.5 million. We can go and run our acquisition of that data, and SAP Analytics Cloud is going to take the data from that capital planning model and push it into, or in this scenario, pull it, I should say, into our P&L and financial statement planning model, right? So we see that 1.58 million acquired there. So again, if you didn't plug in these more detailed models, all these cells would be yellow that you could be able to input to. And then typically on a P&L planning template like this, you are planning kind of below the line items for like interest, income, other income, expense, etc. other. So these items would typically be input enabled while you're finalizing your P&L plan for your company code or for your profit center based on your requirements. So the P&L data is also going to feed into our plan for working capital in balance sheet. So I mentioned, we showed our P&L on there for our net revenue, for our COGS, and for our operating expenses. And those things are going to drive our working capital. When we take a look at some of our assumptions, we have our days and months up here. We have our DSO, our DIO, our DPO, which is going to drive our inventory, our AR, and our AP, right? So if we want to change any of these assumptions, let's say that, hey, starting in June, we got an email from a few vendors that they're extending out their payment terms. So we're going to go from 30, 40 days of DSO, and now we're going to, start having to manage to 60 days of DSO. How does that impact our cash, right? So our cash in hand, how does that impact our loans? Not to mention your financial statement planning. So you can take that 60 days. This is like Excel, so you can just drag and drop that from June all the way until December. And then same as I showed you earlier in some of these data actions, this is utilizing SAP's advanced formula functionality. We can take based off of that input. We're going to go ahead and run this data action to recalculate our AR balance based off of its drivers, utilizing the advanced formula functionality that we've configured in SAC. So this is all part of our prepackaged content, right? These formulas are fairly standardized across companies. Companies do differ in how they manage this, right? But this is a fairly standardized formula. And as you can see, after we've run that data action, it's updated our cash receipts in this roll forward down below. So we see our ending balance, our revenue, our cash receipts, if we had any bad debt, bad debt here as well. And then because of the change from 40 to 60, we can see, our AR balances going up, right? And that has a negative impact to our overall cash. So this is an example, of the standard content that we stand up for companies, and then specific to individual requirements, right? If you have advanced working capital that are really specific requirements based off of your company, you can leverage this, and basically any formula like we have for DSO that you could build out in an Excel workbook, we could replicate with advanced formula functionality within this tool. So again, we could help you plug in this application utilizing our prepackaged content very, very quickly. In a matter of weeks, we could do a low configuration implementation and cater to some of those other requirements. And those are formulas and calculations that we can teach you how they work as well, right? So that's a working capital plan. We have our balance sheet plan. So based off of the recalculated AR, we see the AR changes would come through within this template as well. If we scroll down, we can look at, for example, inventory, right? As I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to do detailed inventory and capacity type planning, there is an IBP supply chain tool that's really targeted for supply chain organizations for that. But again, if you essentially are more owning some of this from a finance perspective, right? Or if you just want to utilize SAC for this, if you can give us an Excel model, we can help you build it up. That being said, here we're just showing simply like for inventory, we do need to plan this for our balance sheet and cash flow, if that's assuming that's a requirement for our organization. So we can plan an input here and just automate at least the collection and aggregation of this data for reporting purposes, and then to feed into our cash flow and balance sheet statements, right? So we could plan, sales, purchase information. We could plan if we had, a write-off for inventory as well. All these yellow cells here, again, are input enabled. So we go ahead and submit our plan information. And then when we're done, you'll notice that this actually, turns yellow here when you make these changes. It's not until we actually go and publish this does this become public for all other users within the organization that have the access to see this data. If you make a change and it didn't quite have the intended impact, it's kind of nice within SAC. You can also come back and utilize this time function button. We changed even our DSO earlier to 60, right? And then we calculated results based off of that. We could start all the way back at the beginning and reverse all the changes we've made to date. And not publish this and make some more changes and then publish when we're done. So this audit trail functionality is pretty neat within the tool. And then all the assumptions that go into your balance sheet are then also flowing into your cash flow, right? So your cash flow, same concept. We have a mapping table that as an administrator, you could maintain that says this account on a balance sheet goes, a change in AR, is equal to your balance sheet AR account, right? So we have a mapping table that maps those natural GL accounts to actual cash flow statement accounts and post the value in local currency. And then when we run this, not only are we posting values in local currency, but we're also translating values in US dollars, and the solution can handle, CTA and other considerations like that as well, right? So we see our updated cash flow numbers for our company code or profit center, if you had data down to that level of granularity. And then you see your check figures at the end of the day to make you feel, comfortable and cozy that you've done everything that you're supposed to do, right? So this is similar to how it works for actual data, although when you're planning, the mappings are slightly different because you're planning at different levels of granularity for working capital, et cetera, right? So once you're actually, satisfied with that, you can go and move on to, additional review steps to review financial statements, to publish reporting books. I'm going to pull up just a couple, very simple financial statements here. I mentioned earlier, this is an analytics tool, so we have some KPI capabilities to compare actual versus forecast, to do some visualizations. I mentioned earlier, as I was starting to say, this tool also does have the ability to run eliminations, right? So within our prepackaged content, we have a solution for transfer pricing, which incorporates partners and allows you to plan and identify where something was made and generates actual intercompany entries automatically based off of the drivers that you give it. And then you can consolidate that. And you could actually consolidate your actual results too. All you need to do is populate partners into here, and based off of an elimination entity, it'll eliminate those results. So you have some very simple statements here just to review, review your data sets. Then you can look at, published books here as well. This is an example that you saw earlier within that PowerPoint, where we have kind of, this is meant to actually be like published out to, you could come directly in the system and interact with this live, right? But it's also meant to be published out if you so desire to a PowerPoint or to a PDF, right? So you actually have this table of contents in here, which has your standard kind of statements for, this is focused on income statement side of the house for your different countries and data sets or company codes, right? You have those actual versus budget bridge comparatives within here. And this also incorporates and contemplates FX. This contemplates, if you wanted to really interpret the drivers behind your variances as well, this calculates, volume variance, which is common for a lot of different companies when they're looking at, actual and budget reporting. You have these nice number callouts that provide the variances here. And then again, all your kind of standard reporting cuts. So you've got your, your comparative view. Right now we're looking at, July. We'll change this to September. You can pull month to date, quarter to date, like I said, local currency or US dollars. You have your trended view, a consolidating view as well. And then you have a vehicle within the solution that can help you collect and aggregate commentary when you're thinking about plan and actual reported statements, right? So the ability to actually collect that commentary, to me, is highly valued. Like, this is something that before I got into consulting, when I was on the corporate side, spent a lot of time collecting, aggregating this commentary. So this is pretty neat. You can have your subsidiaries or even cost center owners go in, and for certain accounts, if they're below or above a certain threshold, they can be responsible for actually having to provide a commentary. And you can put commentary directly into an Excel. You can actually put and share commentary in a report. That's a little separate. That's report specific. This is specific to the data intersection. So if you said, hey, our variance due to plant closure, we'd input that comment here, and this is actually going to store the comment in the database attached to China. And then if you came back and from a corporate perspective, you're reviewing this commentary on a P&L, you could pivot on that account like I saw you like I showed on the other screen. Or you could also, pick your company code, right? And you'll see the commentary, populate here that we just input as well. So a nice capability in here to do that, not only your comparative reporting and bring in your actuals to go along with your financial planning information, but also to help you build commentary. And then, like I said, at the end of the day, you can take these books out and you can actually export them to a PDF, right? You can export them to, a PowerPoint. And, I know like, for legacy BPC people, that never really worked well. It actually works pretty well in the solution. So you can pick PowerPoint here, and then I could say batch, and I could select a filter, and I could publish this out for every single one of the company codes, and it'll run this automatically for me. Could also do this for cost centers, right? All right. Once you've gone through your review, you can go ahead and then you can close and lock your period and finalize your plan as well, right? So that is everything I wanted to show today. A lot in a 45-minute period. As I mentioned earlier, we're happy to share this deck afterwards. Please just follow up with Lauren, who kicked off the session, and we'll do so. And then also, I see a question on here. Did we use Application Designer? There's nothing you saw that we utilized Application Designer. So there's no, more custom development or, JavaScript type stuff, right? This is all utilizing the standard content, which I think shows the strength of the tool. At this point, we'll pause and wait and see if we have any other questions. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up. And yes, like I said, this is all utilizing standard SAP functionality within this tool. And we are also, where possible, utilizing the SAP business content as a starting point for our business content. So we actually look to extend their content where possible. That is not always the case, but that is commonly the case within our applications. We do that wherever possible, right? But they do not always tie out to exactly how, based off of our decade plus of experience implementing these applications, we would approach this. Some of them make a lot of sense, perhaps for a slightly different use case, right? Some of them are very much well aligned with what we have here, right? Another question, do we have previous webinars or demos available online? Yes, absolutely. Check out our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, type in Simplify Solutions, we will come right up in the search immediately. And we have a wealth of videos on YouTube. Also be happy to, if you're going through an evaluation for your company, if you want, assistance in demonstrating content, back to your user community or help building up a business case, happy to do that. And we have standard content costing and approaches to all the solutions that we have, so we can very quickly and agilely help you, again, translate this back to, what this could look like in your world. All right. Very good. As far as time to implement, as I mentioned earlier, for each organization, your complexity and size is going to differ a little bit, right? So we have an approach where we deploy the prepackaged content. Any one of these prepackaged content pieces that you saw earlier can literally be deployed for you to evaluate in weeks with training included, and we have standard costing for that available, right? Depending upon your organization, some of these solutions out of the box may meet your requirements pretty closely, and we'll train. And if you have a good internal center of excellence team, you may be able to then get off and running with that prepackaged content as a good baseline, right? I'd say the larger companies who have larger center of excellence teams can be more successful with that approach when they're seriously, dedicating resources to it as well. With a number of companies, we've taken a low to medium configuration approach to run through a managed implementation. Whether depending on the area, that could be a month and a half, that could be 3 months, right? Depends upon the configuration levels that are required and which one of the solutions it is. Who can I speak to? Please feel free to reach out to myself. From the webinar invites, you should have Lauren's contact information, and she can make sure that you get in contact with the right people. All right. Well, again, thank you for joining. I don't see any other questions. Lauren, anything else before we wrap up here?
Nope, I think we're good to go. Great job, John.
Before everyone jumps off, I think Lauren has a short survey prepared. We're always looking to improve upon what we do. So both constructive and positive reinforcing commentary is very much appreciated. And thank you all for joining today. Lauren, I'll leave it up to you to conclude here.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.